Today on ComputerWorld Canada in Conversation, want to see Tiger Woods' ill-fated trip down the driveway? There's a Chinese company that will animate the news the cameras didn't catch, and that opens up a whole ethical can of worms. But first, a Microsoft research paper says that mandating regular password changes for end users is a waste of time. Rafael Ruffolo, before you tell us why you stridently disagree, why don't you tell us what point Cormac Hurley of Microsoft was trying to make?
Well, this all came about on a research paper that he wrote a few months back, but really something that gained traction in the blogosphere for some reason over the last couple of days. And his thesis is really that end users should, or it's entirely rational for end users to completely avoid the security advice that they get from their IT managers. A case in point was with passwords. He said it's the amount of time that goes into changing the passwords every 30, 60, 90 days is not worth the effort and the time involved for the end users to do that. So simply, they're going to try to find ways to get around practices like that. And that was really what he put a whole mathematical formula to it as well, with the total time spent and the total time users do thinking about this. And he also said users also write these passwords on sticky notes because they've had trouble remembering them, and ends up defeating the purpose. So that was really what his point was.
Yeah. And you think he's wrong?
Yeah, I think he's dead wrong. Let's take the first point that he makes, which is the spending too much time and effort. Really, does it take any more than 30 seconds and maybe 60 seconds to change your password? I don't think so. I think end users are overrating the amount of time it'll take. It requires some effort, yes, but I mean, this is not changing their days around really. Another thing is, it's something that is really important. A lot of times, the enemy is within. We hear with especially with cyber criminals, it's a person, a coworker, taking a USB stick and stealing some sensitive data and taking it out of the enterprise. That is one of the most dangerous threats that enterprises face today. And with passwords, it's the same thing. Sometimes you'll have a nosy rogue employee looking over your shoulder, and he's got your password, and he's checking your email, and there's not much you can do about that unless you've been forced to change your password. And another thing that I thought of was IT departments and HR departments don't really communicate that well with each other. You get a situation where an employee leaves, and the IT department hasn't even been notified that he's left, and the only way they might be notified is if their password comes up for expiry, and they have to change it that way. Otherwise, you have this employee who's left and has access to all their information still. One other point is hackers are a lot smarter now. They'll often leave backdoor ways to get into your computer, and if you haven't changed your password, you're just basically rolling out the red carpet for them. So changing your password gives them a little bit more of a nuisance. So that's 3 good reasons why the end user should take 60 seconds and change their password every couple months. And I guess by the way you asked me the question, I think maybe you disagree with me.
I'm going to beg to differ, actually. I'm going to agree with Mr. Hurley. A couple of reasons. First of all, do you do this? Do you change your password? No, you don't change your password on a regular basis, because it's a colossal pain in the ass when you've got a dozen passwords for different machines and different applications, and you're going to end up writing them down and leaving them on sticky notes, defeating the purpose entirely, as you said earlier. I think also you have to consider the application. Just as an example, I used to work at a place that forced a password change on my voicemail every 45 days. And I ran out of names of obsessive high school crushes to remember those passwords. And that was for my voicemail, which was not, I would argue, it was not a critical security risk there. If passwords are stolen by malware through a keystroke logger or some such, the answer isn't in changing the passwords. The answer is in it not getting on there in the first place. And that's wetware, not software. The best security software is between your ears. However, I think we can agree that a strong password is important.
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, one of the most important things is picking, not doing password as your password, which is a classic one, or maybe the street that you live on, and then when someone asks you to change your password, you put a 1 at the end of it. Those are really classic examples that a lot of people are guilty of. So a classic tip for passwords that I would advise is taking a story or a sentence and having that translate over to your password. So you would take the first letter of every word in the sentence and create your password out of that. So one of them that I came up with was, I can't wait to get my new iPhone 4G, and put an exclamation point at the end of that. So you would take the first letter of each word, you would take the 4, and you would take the exclamation point. All this would create a really difficult password to crack. And that's also got a built-in time frame to it. So you would change it when the iPhone 4G comes out. And that's all, I guess, all your problems with that one.
That's very cool. Very cool. Thank you very much.
Sure, great.
Next up, want to see Tiger Woods' accident? We can't show you the clip ourselves, but if you click on the YouTube link below me, you can take a look. We'll wait. That is an animated reenactment of the scene by a Chinese company that offers a service to major news chains, and it raises some journalistic and technological ethical questions. Shane Schick was at a recent presentation by the company. Shane?
So the company called Next Media, I think they start off, they actually have a newspaper called Apple Daily. It's one of a number of publications there. And so they have a team of animators. That's all they do. I think there's around 160 or more people that are devoted to this. And they do, like, I think up to 25 clips in a day or something of that nature. And so as the media company, you would, they work very closely with editorial teams, and they say, well, this is what we want to show, and they kind of sketch it out and render it. And then you kind of feed it into your news segment. So you'd have kind of the anchor person saying, like, in the news today this happened. So it's for that stuff that you can't normally show. And they gave some examples of a local crime story about a murder, and they actually showed the guy, like, stabbing this person in the chest. And it was quite, crazy to watch, but apparently it's done gangbusters. I think he said even just for their paper's traffic, it went up like 33% since it's gone on. And they've started to sign some deals with some of the newswire type of agencies and people like that.
This is a fairly expensive product.
It's very expensive, and they admit that. I think he said it was around $3,000 per minute of footage. And so their target, I don't think, is necessarily the individual publication or newspaper, because most publications just would never be able to support that. But a wire service like a Reuters or an Associated Press, where that content can be licensed sort of on demand, it would be, it could be a nice add-on. And they really want to kind of focus their efforts on hard news. So they do want things like the Tiger Woods. We ask kind of questions like, well, what isn't appropriate for this kind of a thing? To me, murders kind of falls into that category. But they said, the guy said, well, we don't do sports very well because there's already so many images capturing actual live sports, so why recreate it? But for hard news, there's always those kinds of things that you just cannot get on camera at the time. So to have some way to visualize that for people, I guess, is useful.
Ethically speaking, as a journalist, I'm calling this wrong.
Well,
wrong.
I think that it has the potential to be wrong, especially if it becomes a substitute for that which a media organization could do on its own. So, and I also think that we have to be careful of trying to differentiate between what actually happened and what kind of happened. And so, you could argue that in many cases, in especially traditional print-based media, we tell stories through words, and we kind of ask the reader to do that kind of imagination in their head. In this case, we're sort of doing a bit of that work for them. I think we have to be careful about what we would try to animate and make sure that there's enough kind of underlying facts to support it and not kind of dramatize it or sensationalize it in a way that takes it beyond what actually would have happened in the first place.
I mean, my real concern with this is, from a viewer perspective, is I've often wondered, how many actors doing reenactments on America's Most Wanted have had the police called on them by people who just can't draw that line between reality and reenactment.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Tiger Woods clip, I mean, I was appalled. I found that borderline libelous.
Yeah, I wondered how they kind of get around some of those issues, because you notice it doesn't look exactly like the people, but it's close enough that, you know, Tiger Woods' wife, you know who's who in this clip. And I guess ultimately you have to ask, does it really provide value? You know, on an aesthetic level, I guess that's kind of a subjective judgment, but I don't really believe that any additional facts are conveyed through, you know, these animations, and I think that's kind of what it comes down to. From an IT perspective, I don't think IT professionals get that involved in kind of the content, but some of this kind of animation would end up being a part of their overall content repository. And depending on how they would treat that from a metadata perspective or the way they kind of classify that in a system, you know, I think eventually we'll have to see greater taxonomies created that look at what is kind of verifiable information and what is sort of aesthetic or entertainment kind of value information. And that's where I see there might be some sort of implications from an enterprise content management perspective. Journalistically, it's novel, and maybe we'll figure out a way to use it in the long run.
Thanks a lot, Shane. Thank you very much, and see you next week.